Hi, everybody. Welcome to Two Out the First. It is May 1st, 2026. I am now 43 years in a day. I'm Ryan Ballinger. Great to have you with us. We're presented by our friends at Fescue and Dunes. FescueandDunes.com. We'll tell you a little bit about them later on in the show. We've got plenty to get to on this episode. Planned to do it yesterday, but a long week of high school golf coaching, 4 matches in 4 days. Nice little birthday present. Really entertaining match yesterday with the boys. And we'll get to that another time on a different show. But news comes across that LIV Golf has officially lost its funding of the Saudi Public Investment Fund. They've sunk in somewhere between $5 and $8 billion, depending on what you can see publicly versus what you're guessing is the money that's been sunk into the American LLC version of LIV, as opposed to what's publicly available through Document House over in the UK for their international version of a company. Either way, it's a lot of money. And this kind of confirms what I think people already knew. I think people in LIV certainly knew it as of Mexico City and knew this was happening. I think some people actually knew it before then, if you made me kind of put my tinfoil hat on, with Bryson at South Africa getting emotional and Phil deciding to play South Africa, even though he's played nothing else this season and didn't even play the Masters, right? But decided to play LIV South Africa. I wonder if that tells us something. But nevertheless, now that we know LIV Golf no longer has that Saudi funding moving forward, LIV Golf has made a couple of announcements. Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who's the chairman of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, he is gone from the board. He is no longer the chairman of the board. He has been replaced by a couple of different independent directors. And those guys are basically kind of turnaround artists. They're people who are appointed to the board as consultants, who have this position to be able to kind of authorize big changes to LIV if they can make them. And they are putting out a hopeful tone that they can go find truly billions of dollars in investment that they need to be able to keep this thing moving forward. The run rate for this organization is $100 million a month, right? That's kind of the reported burn rate of their money. So if you're spending $1.2 billion a year with nothing even close to that coming back in terms of revenue, it's going to be really hard to go find private equity that's willing to sink in that kind of money against that kind of burn rate. Now, we see that kind of burn rate in AI and data centers and that type of building right now, but there's a longer term window for that. There is a projection, some of it very rosy, that eventually AI is going to make a lot of money for a lot of people on that investment end. You don't get that sense about professional golf, certainly about LIV Golf. And so from here, LIV's got to soldier on. They've got to try to find a way to milk the money that they have from the Saudis until the end of this season. And they've got to figure out, in a space of probably less than 6 months, of how to get commitments greater than the commitment that was given to the PGA Tour by the Strategic Sports Group, who committed already $1.5 billion to PGA Tour Enterprises, which is the for-profit subsidiary of PGA Tour Inc. The membership-based not-for-profit has a for-profit subsidiary, and that's what Strategic Sports Group threw at them, $1.5 billion at a $20 billion valuation. And they can commit more, another $1.5 billion at really any time to this organization, right? So they're basically playing for 15% of PGA Tour Enterprises. You would be getting basically all of LIV, but all of the headaches if you invested that amount of money into LIV, right? You're going to be burning through basically $1.5 billion a year at this point under the current model. You would have to scale it back dramatically to even think about making money. You'd have to cut purses pretty substantially, more toward $10 million, not $30 million a tournament. You'd have to cut expenses on build out. You probably have to get away from some American venues that you're paying a lot of money to and go to more international places where maybe you pay less money, in markets where you don't have as much access. Problem is, you lose then access to the American sports fan. And that's really the biggest problem for LIV, other than that everything just costs so much that they do, is that they don't have that kind of access to the American sports fan in the numbers and in the financials that they need. If they were drawing 7 figures per tournament every day of a tournament, particularly the ones on the weekend on Fox, they might be able to start to draw an argument that it's worth the investment, right? The NWSL, WNBA, Special Women's Hockey League. Like, these leagues have really developed an audience on television because they've found TV partners. And as a result, has also come massive investment into them. There's a lot of money in sports being thrown around right now. I just don't think it's going to be thrown at the Saudis anytime, away from the Saudis to LIV Golf from an independent organization anytime soon. I just cannot see that happening. And at the same time, as we've said before, if there's doubt about where the future of the money is coming from, then Bryson DeChambeau can't really negotiate in good faith with LIV, and LIV can't negotiate in good faith with Bryson because they don't know where the next dollar is coming from. And whatever they can negotiate with him, they can't exactly promise and be absolute certain that they're going to have that money. And that creates a huge problem, which means if Bryson leaves, now you're down to Jon Rahm. And, Jon Rahm's done very well this year, but now you have a one-person tour, right? No offense to Joaquin Niemann or Taylor Gooch or any other players on this tour who have accomplished a lot in golf. But in terms of current product, current competitiveness, as it's constituted on LIV today, it's Rahm, it's Bryson, it's Niemann sometimes, and that's it. And if you lose one of your big two, effectively big two, because Niemann quite hasn't been there this year, then what do you got? You got a one-guy tour, and he's just playing for free money every week while everyone else plays for the peanuts? There's just no way that's plausible. So there's a big job in front of Scott O'Neill here, probably too big of a job, but we'll see. I know a lot of people were dancing on graves yesterday and the day before that about where LIV is and how it is financially in very dire straits. But there's still that, so you're saying there's a chance kind of moment where I guess there's a very minuscule chance that this somehow works out. And they, I hate the phrase pull an inside straight, but that this works out in some fashion. So I'm going to go to LIV Golf Virginia next week. I've never been to a LIV event. Kind of want to get a sense of what the vibe is like, from the participants, from staff, all that stuff. I want to kind of understand what's going on here now that the reality is publicly clear and they've known this for a while. The writing's been on the wall. So what is all of that going to look like? So we'll talk about that next week. Probably go down there a couple mornings. We still have our last week of the golf season, but I'll still go down there and get a sense of what's happening on the ground and try to figure it out from there. But some things to remember: LIV players under contract cannot besmirch LIV, which means they're not going to be in violation of the contract, right? You're also not really able to get out of your contract unless LIV tells you they're planning to shut down. There are clauses in these guys' contracts giving them basically a 20-day out. If LIV says it's shutting down, then you can basically go to LIV and say, I want out of my deal in 20 days, and there's no questions asked. And that was in Taylor Gooch's contract from back when he sued the PGA Tour to try to get the FedEx Cup playoffs as he was transitioning over to LIV Golf. So we know that there are outs for players for that reason. But if you're a Rahm, if you're a DeChambeau, if you're anybody else who wants to keep playing high-level competitive golf after this, are you already reaching out to the PGA Tour? You're reaching out to the DP World Tour to try to figure out, is there a pathway back for you? There are 10 guys already on LIV that play the DP World Tour. They have some place to go if it goes away tomorrow. Not saying it is, but if it goes away tomorrow, they have some place to go. For the players that were referenced under the returning member program, the guys that won majors since LIV came into existence, there's 3 of those guys left, right? There's Bryson, Rahm, and Cam Smith. That window closed, but could they go to the tour and say, all right, can we come back if X, Y, and Z happens? Whatever that is. And I don't know what that would be, but it probably wouldn't be the same punishment that Brooks Koepka got. Koepka got out of his contract willingly. He never sued the PGA Tour. Everyone kind of seems to like him. That's not necessarily the case with Rahm and Bryson and Cam Smith. So I don't think they would get the same sweetheart deal. And then everybody else would probably get the, well, go play better, see you in Q school kind of messaging, or go play DP World Tour, see if you can get through the race to Dubai that way. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Those options are actively being explored. I'm sure that's kind of the job of an agent to handle the what ifs of these types of things. And then we'll see from there what happens next week. We know the LIV New Orleans event is gone, so now there's a huge gap between the June events in Spain and the United Kingdom. We'll see what happens there. I think there's still a lot to happen here, and probably in a relatively quick time frame. But that now that we kind of know for sure that the Saudi Public Investment Fund is done with LIV Golf and they've written off their loss, it's almost impossible to imagine certainly that kind of money coming back into the product from someone else's pocket. So we'll see what happens there. All right, want to make a switch over to this concept I kind of alluded to, I think, on the Tuesday show, and that is this idea that the PGA Tour has a scheduling problem, right? We are playing our second signature event this week. By we, I mean the PGA Tour, not me personally. And they're playing the Cadillac Championship this week at Trump Doral in Florida on the Blue Monster. And this is the second signature event in 3 weeks. There will be another one next week at the Truist Championship at Quail Hollow. And then you've got the PGA Championship after that. These three signature events are sandwiched in between the Masters and the PGA. And then you have the Zurich Classic in between, which most of the top 50 players did not compete in. But Matt Fitzpatrick, the world number 3, did. So he could play with his brother. They won. That worked out. And Matt is not playing this week. Alex is, and he should. He's got access to these events now. But 5 of the world top 20 are not competing in this tournament this week. This is the worst signature field they've ever had. And it's still very, very good. Still getting 61.5 world ranking points to the winner this week, in big part because of Scottie Scheffler's participation in this. But that is a problem for the PGA Tour in that you've had the reigning Masters champion skip Harbortown and skip at Doral. By the way, he was up in D.C. for the state dinner to honor King Charles III the other day with Trump. I mean, Trump called him out in a speech, like interrupted himself from talking as he does, and called out Rory McIlroy for winning the Masters. So, different for anyone who's thinking it was a political statement, you might want to reconsider that thought. That said, Scottie Scheffler is not playing next week at Quail Hollow. He doesn't like playing the week before a major, and he was asked about that heading into the week, and he gave a judicious answer. He towed the line very well and just saying, hey, I'm trying to kind of manage opportunities. There are so many, putting in that kind of positive spin. And he's right. There are so many positive opportunities for players like him to go play events for enormous sums of money, most of them with no cut, no threat of not cashing at all. And for him, a guy incredibly talented, he can pretty much assure himself a top 15 finish at will right now on the PGA Tour. So him not playing Quail Hollow is a personal decision to take a week off, get ready for the PGA Championship title defense at Aronimink, and then he's going to play after that, right? He's going to play in Texas, and then he's going to play Memorial, then he's going to take a week off, then it's going to be U.S. Open, then it's Travelers, right? So that's another big stretch, but not nearly as concentrated as we have. So here's my fix for this situation that was created in part because the Cadillac Championship was concocted, right? No one wants to be in Miami in basically after this week. South Florida is really rough in terms of just comfort and climate from May through September. Just not doable, right? You have your window in February, March, and April, maybe beginning of May, that's starting to push it to make this event happen. But you've got a Florida swing that has API, has the players, and then this isn't part of the Florida swing officially, but it is really obviously a Florida event. So what do you do to try to accommodate that in a schedule where it sounds like the PGA Tour is going to start a little bit later? They've gotten rid of the Century as the first event in February or in January, the beginning of January, and they've gotten rid of the Sony Open Hawaii the week after. So they're going to start, at least currently as framed, with the American Express in the middle of January. That shortens up the window of the season, and you've got through the end of the FedEx Cup playoffs at the Tour Championship. What do you do with all of that? I think my fix is 2 big moves. We want to move the PGA Championship, first of all. Get it out of May. Get it back to August. Get it back to being Glory's last shot. Get it back to where it really belongs. Give it that definition as the last major of the year. There's no offense to the month of May. May is lovely, but the PGA Championship feels lost in May. Glory's last shot worked because, for better or for worse, the PGA Championship has the least identity unto itself, right? Masters, same course every year. It's the first one. U.S. Open, national championship, hardest course you're going to play all year. Open Championship, the one that's not in the United States, Links Golf, weather determines the champion on an incredible rotation of courses. And then you've got the PGA, which goes to great venues, is really well run, and is a very, very nice tournament. But what's the defining factor of it? And I think it needs to be that it's the last one. And I don't mean the last major. I mean the last tournament of the PGA Tour season. I think the FedEx Cup season, should end with the PGA Championship. They should take what we have now known as the FedEx Cup playoffs and move them up into July and early August. And the reason I say that is because July, after the Open Championship and into the FedEx Cup playoffs, is kind of a quagmire on the schedule. No offense to the tournaments in Minnesota and in Michigan. Those tournaments are well run and well attended and well supported. However, they don't draw the best fields. They draw 10 to 12 top 50 players, maybe 15 to 16 now that there are fewer players who get in the playoffs. But those are weak points on the schedule. If you move the FedEx Cup playoffs up just a little bit, you get it done sooner, take a week or two off, maybe a week off after the Open Championship, start the playoffs, end the Tour Championship in Atlanta. You have your big to-do. Winner gets FedEx Cup, gets $10 million all at once. All that is great. And then the last tournament of the year is the PGA Championship. Bring everybody back in, one last hurrah. Go play the biggest tournament of the year right then and there. And then you get to call truly glorious last shot again. You end the year, whether you do it sometime in middle of August or at the end of August and gear it toward really Labor Day weekend, somewhere in there. And you get to have a bon voyage to the year in golf, and you do it with a major championship. I think that's great. I think that is awesome. And then by moving the PGA Championship from May to August sometime, whether it's in the middle or the end, that gives room to move the Players Championship back to May. Players was so much better in May. The course, TPC Sawgrass, was so much more difficult, so much more challenging and interesting in May than it is currently in March. Right now in March, and it's almost kind of always been this way. In March, the stadium course in the Ponte Vedra area, it's a little cold, right? It's Northeast Florida, so it's not so far south that you get all that warm weather that you're expecting for that time of year. It gets wet, almost always some kind of rain issue, makes the course softer. That doesn't make it easier, but it tends to make it softer. And it just kind of feels like you're racing to try to get in front of the Masters. The Players has established its identity as it's not a major yet, or maybe it never will be in some people's eyes. But you have more than 50 years of tradition for this tournament that is awesome. Move it to May, make the course hard, play it, make it Florida's major, right? Put it right there in the schedule, and that would be awesome. Now you've opened up this window of opportunity to have a Florida swing that isn't Bay Hill and the Players. It could be Bay Hill and Doral as your signature events. Now, then you go to May, you can kind of space this out a little bit better. Now you can have the Truist Championship and you can have the Players Championship. And they can kind of lead into one another. In April, you can have the Masters and Harbortown as we've almost always known in our entire lives. This entire thing then works where you try to get two big tournaments a month. You can have a major and a signature event. That seems to work pretty well. June's a little bit of an exception because straddling the month, you have the Memorial at the end of May or early June. Then you've got the U.S. Open and Travelers back to back. And that seems to work out fine. Most people don't seem to be bothered by that. But you can move Travelers back another week or two if you want it. And then have that be a signature event kind of straddling June and July. I don't think that necessarily has to change, but I think I would do that if I were the future competition committee and Brian Roloff at the PGA Tour. I think it brings everything together. I think it makes it clear for everybody. If you're going to start the year with a little bit later, you start with the Century, that's your signature event. Then you've got Amex for your first full field event. Then, as the current 2027 schedule is constructed, you get right into signature events. You know, you've got Century, which is the signature, but as we know them, signature events. You've got Pebble Beach. And then right after that, you've got Riviera. Bang, bang. Like 3 big events in 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And then you've got the Waste Management Phoenix Open, which isn't a signature event, but it's a huge event unto itself. You come out the gate strong, right? And then you're playing the rest of February, figure that all out, right? But before you know it, it's the end of February, and you're starting your March Florida swing. You've got 2 signature events. You've got good tournaments. Whatever happens with PGA National, cognizant. We're not sure what's going to happen there. But you also have Valspar, which is well supported. The players love it. It's well attended. At that point, if you kind of figure out how to address Detroit and Minnesota, and I think you could make it part of a swing of sites that you move through for either the BMW Championship or for the FedEx St. Jude Championship, because you can't be playing when it's hotter than hell in Memphis in July and August. Figure out how to move those around. Create a rotation for those. I've always argued for rotations for all of the FedEx Cup playoff events, but certainly for the first 2. And now you've got all of these things solved. You've got a banger schedule, no duds. Everything's great. So it's a great run from basically the middle of January through the end of August. Let's do it. I think it would be great. So let me know what you think about that. All right, we're going to wrap up the show with just a quick heads up. I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to be at the PGA Championship for a little bit that week. But before, the appetizer is going to be playing in a Pro-Am for the LPGA's Kroger Queen City Championship out in Cincinnati. Really, really excited about that. I'm going to be playing with my buddy Brendan Sweeney from the French Lake Resort. We don't know who we're playing with yet. The day of the event is May the 13th. So we'll find out about that at a pairing party on Tuesday. You get to play with 2 pros, 9 and 9. It'll be a fun stuff. We'll do all kinds of content around it. We'll put that out on socials, whether that's at Golf Newsnet or at Ryan Ballingy Golf on Instagram and Facebook as well. That's going to do it for us today on the show. Thanks so much for watching or listening. I appreciate it. Get a hold of me, Ryan at thegolfnewsnet.com. As just mentioned on social media, either Golf Newsnet or Ryan Ballingy or Ryan Ballingy Golf. We'll be back with another show next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hope you enjoy whether you're watching the golf, Kentucky Derby, doing nothing at all, playing some golf yourself. Have a great time out there. We'll catch you next week right here on 2 of the First.